The antebellum period was a time of national disunity, sectional tensions, and disputes over slavery. Henry Clay, the Great Compromiser, proposed the Compromise of 1850, which consisted of 5 major components. This compromise stated that California would enter as a free state, and in the Utah and New Mexico territories, popular sovereignty for slavery took over. In addition, Texas gave up their land claims for $10 million, the Fugitive Slave Act was passed, and the slave trade was banned in Washington, D.C.
In 1852, Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, a novel based upon racial stereotypes that worsened tensions between the North and the South. This novel portrayed the evils of slavery and provoked the abolitionist cause.
In 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed. This act is said to be the most notable event preceding the Civil War. Since this area was not yet a territory, many settlers didn't move there because they couldn't legally own land. Senator Stephen A. Douglas wanted Nebraska as a territory and proposed that Kansas would enter as a slave state. The Kansas-Nebraska Act allowed each territory to decide the issue of slavery on the basis of popular sovereignty. Kansas as a slave state would violate the Missouri Compromise, which angered the North. This act led to the creation of the Republican Party.
Many people, both pro-slavery and anti-slavery, came to Kansas in 1856 because of popular sovereignty. Starting in Lawrence, there were many violent outbreaks leading to Kansas obtaining the nickname Bleeding Kansas. There was so much violence that some people consider this the start of the Civil War.
Dred Scott was a slave that lived in Illinois with his master, where slavery was technically illegal. He tried to sue for his freedom in 1857, but he couldn't because his race kept him from being a citizen. Chief Justice Roger B. Taney stated that any black man could not attain citizenship. He also said that blacks were never free, even if they lived in a free state, which essentially meant that a free state did not exist. The court ruled in favor of Taney, which increased tensions between the North and the South. The North could not accept the decision because they felt that the court was more in favor of the South.
In 1858, Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas competed for a spot in the Senate. They had several public debates discussing the issue of slavery and slave freedom. Lincoln said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand," meaning the country cannot persevere as half slave, half free. Even though Lincoln lost, his views on slavery left a lasting impact on our country.
In 1859, abolitionist John Brown led a disastrous raid attacking the federal arsenal in Harper's Ferry, an attempt to steal their weapons. Brown's plan was to give the weapons to slaves so they could revolt. However, this attack was a failure and Brown was sentenced to death, leaving him as a martyr to abolition.
The presidential election of 1860 was one of the most important elections in history. This election was between Republican Abraham Lincoln, Democrat Stephen A. Douglas, Southern Democrat John C. Breckinridge, and John Bell, who was a part of the Constitutional Union Party. Lincoln received no votes in 9 states, but won 40% of overall popular votes in the larger states. Lincoln's election led to a number of southern states to secede from the Union as a result of Lincoln being the first Republican president.
On December 20, 1860, South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union after the election of the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. South Carolina was mainly Democratic, which was the primary reason they seceded from the Union.
By February 1861, 6 other states also seceded from the Union. These states included Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. Representatives from these states met in Montgomery, Alabama, where 3 days after their meeting they celebrated the birth of the Confederate States of America. Secession split the South, while the development of a new political party split the Union.
All of these events ultimately led to the Civil War, which broke out in April of 1861.